Alright, finna go ahead and get it started. What's good, everybody? Welcome back to the Life of a Champ podcast. For today's episode 196, we're going to be discussing a good servant but a bad master. Now, this is going to be a concept that I think is very, very interesting and something that has recently came to me. And not necessarily, I'm not claiming this idea. I'm saying I heard this idea, and there's a lot of people who have claimed different versions of it, which I'll go over. Um, Much later. But a few things I want to say before I go to get it started. Make sure you're going to follow me on Twitch, TikTok, and on Rumble at Life of a Champ podcast on every single platform. And yeah, let's go ahead and get this started, man. So like I said, you know the topic: a good servant but a bad master. So what that means to me is this. It means to me, well, first of all, I think it means many different things. First of all, and obviously it depends on the context that you want to go ahead and use it in. But in short, I would define it like this: a good servant but a bad master. So essentially, when you're not held up to your own devices and you rely on, let's just say you rely on something. Like I'll just give you a general example. Let's just say a good servant would be, let's just say the school system. We'll use the school system as an example, right? So a good servant would be you go to school, you go in, you learn from somebody, and then you leave, right? Or you learn from somebody. You do whatever you do in school, right? Some people learn, some people just fuck off. Just be for real. But essentially the concept is like this, right? You might be a good servant there, but let's just say if you were left to your own devices and you needed to learn on your own and you need to learn a specific type of material, you therefore might be a bad master. Who knows? Maybe you don't like learning that much. Then you would be what could be considered a bad master. So obviously that is just one example. But essentially it is what I'm going to build off of off of that one example. But yes, I do believe that this is going to be this is going to be a universal thing that I think can be applied to a lot of things, especially when you evaluate the human brain and you evaluate the way that people function and just observing human behavior. That's something that I've done very, very closely. Um, and one example I can give you is this, right? Let's just say there are certain people who are a good servant but a bad master when it comes to their health, right? When they're told what to do or fed a certain thing, they can go ahead and act in a way that would be healthy. But if they don't have that accountability there, they might be like I said, they're left to their own devices. They would be a bad master or a terrible master. They would not be able to govern themselves properly, and that I think that is probably one of the biggest problems that I see within most people, especially a lot of adults, is they've lost this ability to go ahead and self-govern themselves. They're very, very good at following directions, but when it comes to leaving them up to their own devices, most of them lack the self-discipline and willpower to go ahead and do what they want to go ahead and do, or be the person that they know they need to be, or get done with the things they know they need to get done with. And I think there's a lot to be said right there, because most people watching this are probably adults, right? But there's very, very few people that are on here that actually do what I just said, who are a person who's very, very good at self-governing themselves, who knows when he needs to stop something and knows when he needs to start something, or she, or whatever you would like to fill in right there. And one perfect example, and this is a similar example I used earlier, but I want to use it again. There's a lot of people who are very, very good, or who aren't very good at, or yeah, who aren't very good at, let's just say, governing their health, which is you, right? They have no physical self-discipline. Therefore, their mental discipline is going to be obviously less than desirable, in my opinion, for sure. If you don't have that physical aspect, your mental aspect is not going to be as sharp as it truly can be. And with that being said, the people who lack that ability to have that, um, they lack that ability to go ahead and make healthy choices. Maybe they do go ahead and value this, but they might value something that is less valuable, objectively valuable. And then they lack that ability to self govern themselves, right? But if they were told exactly what to do, If they said, okay, this is how you take care of yourself. This is how you take care of your health. And if you do this decision, if you make these decisions, you're going to be better off. If they had somebody holding them accountable who was their master, essentially, like I said, for the example's sake, then they might be able to do better, right? So yeah, I would say a lot of people can truly resonate with this. And of course, everybody, everybody's going to feel this to an extent, right? But the ideal is this. This is something that I became a lot better at, and I will progressively become better over my span of my life. Is becoming better, is understanding this fundamental human flaw and reconstructing it in your favor. If you know that you might be a bad master, but you might be a really, really good servant, it's very, very easy for you to go ahead and learn things. It's very, very easy for you to go ahead and, or rather, it's very, very easy for you to go ahead and learn things that you know you need to learn when you have the right system in place. And that's the flaw that most people, and that is the flaw that most people have, is they have a lack of systems. They have a lack of defined values. They have a lack of, yeah, I would just say habits. They just have a lack of habits for sure. So with all these things combined, that's going to make you a bad master. But if you had some structure in place, you would be a good servant under the rule of your own. And that is what I've done. I recognize these things very, very thoroughly. So when I'm in my best state of mind, I've created a plan for myself. I had let my present self be the master of my future self, which I will serve. I will serve my past self because I knew my past self had a well thought out. So, for example, right, I write up my morning. If I write up my morning the day before, right? If I fail to write my day up, my day is going to be less structured. Therefore, it's going to have more cracks. There's going to be less productivity and more opportunity for distraction because I don't have it written up, right? It's much easier to follow a list that is already set as opposed to going with it and going without that list, going without that structure, and then just living your life. Like I said, if you're basing your day based off of productivity, of course, right? Like I said, if you want to just base it off of, oh, I just want to do whatever I want to do, which I really wouldn't recommend for most days. Um, then obviously you would take it another way. But I'm gonna give you three examples of this concept, right? So the first one is this: the mind is a good servant but a bad master. So if you're watching this or rewatching this, I want you to go ahead and let me know what that truly means to you, right? The mind is a good servant but a bad master. Because that, like I said, that one right there, that one's somebody said that one, and I was like, okay, that makes sense. I can see why somebody would say that. To me, the mind is a good servant but a bad master. Like I said, it just goes back to the basic fundamental human principle that it is much easier for us to go ahead and follow direction as opposed to be the one who's giving direction. Most people are very, very good at following direction, but most people lack the discipline to go ahead and do what they know they need to go ahead and do. And it sounds super goofy, right? But like I said, it just comes back down to the things in which people value. There's a lot of things that people value that they do not act upon. Truly value. Like there's objective things that are worth valuing, right? So let's just say, for example, a good body is one of them, right? But people will lack the ability to self govern themselves. They'll be a bad master to go ahead and to working out, or they'll be a bad master when it comes to eating good, or eating, like, it's just, yeah, just eating good, or eating what they know they need to eat. Maybe eating more, maybe eating less. They have no discipline, right? So obviously, like I said, that was just one example. But if you're watching this, I want you to let me know what that means to you. The mind is a good servant, but a bad master. Your mind doesn't always have the best. It doesn't. Your mind, if you think about this, if you observe your mind enough, your mind doesn't always have the best interest in mind for you. That's the craziest part. There's a certain part of your mind that does, and there's definitely a certain part of your mind that doesn't, right? I've observed this within my own mind, right? There's plenty of times where I know I need to go ahead and get something done because I value getting that thing done. But there's also this side of my mind that says, man, come on, just lay down, just get comfortable, man. You don't have to do the work right now. But if I had set up a day for myself that's going to be very, very productive, right? I can follow that day and be a good servant. But if I was left my own devices, and I stuck with that side of my mind, right? I would be a bad master because I wouldn't be doing the things that I had set out to do. So, like I said, I'll give you an example, right? But I do believe that that can apply to many different areas of life, many different aspects of life. And another one I'll give you as an example of is this: money is a good servant, but a bad master. Now, this one you can kind of take a little bit different, right? Money is a good servant, but a bad master. When money is working for you and doesn't control you, you're doing very, very good. It can act as a good servant, right? Like I said, if it's under your control and it is not necessarily governing your life, to like I said, not fully governing your life. Of course, money governs your life to an extent, but it's not. You're more than okay with making a decision that doesn't result in money because you might value something higher than money, which is fine, right? So let's just say, for example, let's just say you value, instead of working 7 days a week, you'll work 5 days a week. In those 2 days, you'll have 2 off days. Maybe you can work those days, but you choose to have 2 off days because you value your own personal time more than you do money. I would hope you value your time over money, right? But like I said, the concept, right? Money is a good servant, but a bad master. You don't want money to go ahead and govern your life, right? Because if it governs your life, then it would be a bad master. Because quite frankly, if you're just doing things for money, if you're putting that at the top of your value hierarchy, and you're letting that govern your life, thus being a bad master, it might not work out in the most ideal way possible for you, for sure. So, like I said, money is a good servant, but a bad master. Another example I would say is this: thinking is a good servant, but a bad master. And like I said, it can kind of go hand in hand with the concept that I discussed earlier, with the mind being a good servant, but a bad master. Yeah, but thinking is a good servant, but a bad master. So, for example, right? I think it was Alan Watts that said that, if I'm not mistaken. But with this example, to think all day and to be only thinking would be essentially thinking being your master. Yeah, that is the thing that it consumes your mind the most, right? Obviously, we know there's things that are going to be more important um, than just thinking, right? Acting, of course, would be something that is higher than thinking, of course. But with that being said, thinking would be a good servant if it didn't exactly control your life, or if that wasn't the only thing that you did. It can be a good um, it can be a good element of action. It can be a very, very productive element of action if done correctly. But if it was the master, right? If that's all that you did, it might not serve in your favor the best way, right? That's why a lot of people overthink. They lack the action, and then they lack the result that they want, because simply because they're choosing for thinking to be they're choosing thinking to be their master, as opposed to just letting it be a good servant. It could be Thinking can be a great an excellent servant if you just treat it as that, right? If you just leave it in its most basic form, right? Where it doesn't necessarily govern your life completely. So, for example, right, I'll give you one example with the podcast, right? If I had sat in my room all day and just thought of ideas, and I never did anything with these ideas at all, right? I just sat in my room, I thought about all these great ideas, all right? I learned all these great things, and I never expressed it with anyone. I do believe that thinking would be a bad master in that aspect. Maybe I'd be overthinking situations and maybe not taking enough action, right? But the reason why thinking is a good servant is because when I learn something, I want to go ahead and express it with people, because I believe that is the highest human contribution that I can go ahead and make, is to be able to learn something, or take my observations of life, analyze what is of the most importance, and analyze what could actually benefit somebody's life. And then now I use that form of thinking as a good servant, when I could just use it as a bad master and just chill in my room, think all day about a bunch of things, and then just don't mention it to anybody. And I feel like that was just that's an example. Of course, that's just one example, but um, yes, thinking can be your best friend and your worst enemy at the same time, and I do believe that that's the good servant and a bad master. Um, yeah, that's pretty much what it is when in the true essence of that, it could be your biggest friend or your worst enemy for sure. Best friend or worst enemy for damn sure. So maybe you guys have an example that we can discuss. If you do, leave it in the comments whether you're watching this or rewatching this. I want you to go and let me know for sure because there's plenty of examples. There's plenty of elements of life that will go ahead and fall into this good servant and a bad master, or but a bad master um, structure. We'll say that. Um, and of course, I would say, obviously, you can kind of get my opinion on this. You kind of, if you've already watched this far, you kind of understand where I stand with this. I would say definitely most people lean towards being a bad master for sure, and you just have to recognize this. You just have to recognize that, and then you must combat it strategically, right? This would be you being a better master, I would say, right? Understand that the human brain works a certain way, and it can work into your favor, where you can be a good servant to your own mind or to your best ideas. But here's the thing: there's a lot of people that just don't even think that far. They're simply just a bad master, and they don't understand that their mind can be working for them instead of working towards them. Just that small adjustment in life, if you just structure your life differently, right? It could work in your favor. So I'll give you one example, right? I just thought about this one. I think it's very, very important for people to have social obligation to do certain things to hold them accountable. I think that's a very important thing. And the example I'll use is this. Let's just say I'm trying to go to the gym. Or let's just say I'm not feeling like I really want to go to the gym, right? That would be me being a bad master if I decided to not go. But I do know that I must go because I want a healthy body. So I must act as if I'm a good servant to to uh to contributing to a healthy mind and a healthy body. And I have people who hold me accountable to that. So I'm not a bad master and I can be a good servant because it is easy. It is easy within my environment and I have social obligation to go ahead and act that way because if I truly do not, people will hold me accountable. If I do not, they're going to say something. And like I said, if I don't want them to say anything, I must act in a way that would make them not say anything, at least anything negative for sure. So that would just be one example. You can use social obligation and use your mind to work in your favor. But here's the thing, like I said, most people don't even think like that. They don't think that there's specific ways that they can reconstruct their day, reconstruct their life, reconstruct their habits that'd be working in favor for them. You must act in a way in the present moment where your future self is going to thank you for choosing that decision or for acting in accordance to what was the best thought at the time. Because if you don't, it is very, very easy for you to get distracted in this life. There's plenty of distractions, and I would say more distractions in this life right now than there has ever been in human history. So, with that being said, you must act in a way where your mind is going to be working towards being a good servant as opposed to being a bad master. The human brain is set up for comfortability. The human brain is set up for um, the path of least resistance. But if you understand thoroughly that the path of least resistance isn't exactly the most ideal path for you to go ahead and strive towards, that for you, or it isn't the exact path that you want to go ahead and go down yourself, right? You must understand that thoroughly and act in accordance and set up your life in a way where you say, I can be a good servant to these good thoughts that I've had within my head. Or else, I will be a bad master and might not act on the ways in which I would like to act. I said it's a big flaw that a lot of people have. They don't know how to govern themselves. They're bad masters to the life that they would like to live. They're not acting in a ways They're not acting in ways that would truly benefit them in their life, at least at least within a lot of aspects. I'm not saying that you need to be acting perfect all the time, right? Which is going to bring me to my next concept that I want to talk about. This is one of the most profound concepts that I've heard probably this year, and I do believe that there's somebody that can take something from this for sure. So when I'm talking about being a being a good servant and a bad master, I do believe that there's going to be certain periods of time where, how do I want to describe this? There's going to be certain periods of time where you can't always act perfect. And I think that's something that we need to become very, very clear on. I'm not saying that all the time that you're going to act on what you value. You're never going to do what you want, but you're going to act on what you value, right? You're going to be I'm not saying that you're always going to be a good servant to your values, right? This concept that I heard from the Joe Rogan podcast when he had what is his name? Something Howard. What's his name, man? I can't remember his name, man. Okay, he's basically discussing this one concept that I thought was very, very interesting. He mentioned it from Alan Watts. It was this concept of needing a balance of uh, what is that word, man? Oh, it was the concept of needing a balance of beneficence and rascality. And essentially that concept is this. Beneficence is essentially acting in a morally good way. And rascality is, let's just say, the opposite. Maybe acting foolish, maybe acting a little wild, maybe not choosing the best decision for your life, but understanding that life is going to have those moments, and no one can act perfect, and no one should even strive to act perfect. You should have that balance of beneficence where you're striving towards a moral good outcome, right? But you must have that balance of both, because if you lack a balance of both, you're holding yourself to an unrealistic standard. So I'm not saying for you to always be a good servant to your mind or to your life situation, right? It's because it's not always going to be easy to act in that way anyways. I'm not saying for you to act perfect. I'm telling you to strive for perfection. You're not even strive for I'm not even telling you to strive for perfection. I'm telling you to strive for, I'm just gonna say less imperfections. I'll say that. Right? You're not always going to make the decisions, and I don't expect anybody to always make the best decisions. You should strive to go ahead and make the best decisions you possibly can. But of course, there's always going to be moments of when you're going to need to be human. And you might enjoy something else in the current moment. But the thing is, the flaw that exists is this: is people lean too much on the side of rascality, and when they lean on that side, they begin to make decisions and use the cop out of they're young or an excuse. And if you look at most of their time, 9 out of 10 times they're acting within rascality. And that obviously is going to lead you down a certain life where you're only doing what you want and you're just acting wild and you're acting reckless. Like I said, there's going to be moments and plenty of opportunities to go ahead and do that within this life, of course. I'm not saying for you to never act in that way because, like I said, I don't think that's exactly realistic. I do believe maybe eight out of 10 times you should be acting in that beneficence point of view, which is, like I said, acting towards a moral good and striving for better, essentially. But like I said, if you observe most people, this is my own personal perspective, right? If you observe most people are going to lean towards that side of rascality, and when they're leaning towards that side of rascality, they just don't make enough good decisions for their life to excuse their actions, and that is a big problem. Because here's the thing: if you're going to go ahead and act in a way that maybe is a little foolish, maybe a little bit, maybe you're indulging within certain vices, maybe you're having a drink or you're having a smoke or you're doing whatever, right? Doing whatever floats your boat that makes you happy in the moment, right? But if you begin to abuse this, your mind is not going to work in your favor. Your life situation isn't going to work out in your favor. And I do believe that if you're able to balance the beneficence and rascality and find a healthy balance for yourself, and I do believe everybody's balance is going to be a little bit different, but you must take the time to analyze what is going to be the most beneficial for your life, where you're still getting enough enjoyment, but you're also taking care of the shit that you know you need to take care of. The second you can find that balance is a second that you can go ahead and excuse yourself for doing something that maybe isn't the best decision for you to go ahead and make. For you to have that drink, for you to have that smoke, for you to do, like I said, whatever floats your boat, whatever is your vice. Are you taking care of business or are you not? Deep down, are you taking care of business or are you not? And if you're not, then you must pull back a little bit on acting like a damn rascal. Because if you don't, it will govern your whole life. Simple as that, man. Simple as that. So finding a balance. The better you are at finding a balance, life is going to be most enjoyable. And I do believe that the only way for you to go ahead and get a full squeeze out of this life is if you're balancing the rascality and the beneficence. Because if you don't, one is going to be taking over the other. If you're acting always morally good and always doing what you're supposed to, always doing it, like I said, acting in that beneficence side of yourself, I do believe that it's going to produce a lot of good for damn sure. Always, instantly, it's going to produce a lot of good, and most good, right? But I do believe that you're not going to be able to get the full squeeze out of life, because I do believe that there's going to be moments as you're a human being where you're going to want to go ahead and act on that rascality. And I feel like rejecting that rascality always isn't going to give you the most enjoyment out of this life. And I'm not saying to chase the most enjoyment out of this life. I'm saying what is how can you achieve the most fulfillment and enjoyment within life with also doing the least amount of foolish things that you possibly can do. That is how you find that is fulfillment, right? And same with the other thing, right? I'm not saying for you to only prioritize enjoyment and only act in that within that rascality side of yourself and to ignore the beneficence, right? I'm not saying that at all, because like I said, that's going to lead you down a path that's probably not a path that you want to go down, hopefully, right? Or at least hopefully you're not acting like that. You must find a balance between these two things. And if you're able to achieve a balance between these two things, your life will be different. Your life will be changed. You'll be able to become a lot more self-aware and understand that you cannot let that rascality govern your life. Because if you're able to keep it at bay, if you're able to make sure it is a good servant and not a bad master, you're going to be in a much better spot. The problem is that rascality that I told you about, that is the bad master that most people get abused by. You are a good servant to yourself if you're able to balance rascality and beneficence. And I do believe with that you must create some type of you must become clear on your boundaries and your limitations that you will have with acting, let's say, like I said, acting within that rascality, right? So making a decision that is probably going to give you enjoyment right now, but it's probably not good for you long term. If you're able to balance that with clear boundaries and clear limitations, that doesn't allow you to affect your pursuing of beneficence. That's going to be it's night and day. It's a night and day type of life. You're not going to feel as guilty for doing certain things because you understand, hopefully, that you're doing what you know you need to go ahead and do. You're being the person that you know you need to go ahead and be. You're acting like a person of character. And you can still have some fun while doing it. Because, like I said, if you're just acting 100% disciplined all of the time, there is going to be plenty of enjoyment within that, right? But I do not believe that you're going to be getting the full squeeze out of life. And if you look at any person, for the most part, everybody's going to be flawed. And even the most self disciplined people at times do things that they truly just enjoy, because that is what life's about. Life is about not only doing those things, but still doing those things and having a balance. And whatever balance that looks like for you is something that you must be clear on. Set your boundaries, set your limitations, but get the most enjoyment out of this life with also taking care of the shit that you know you need to go ahead and take care of. Simple as that, man. So yes, I'm gonna go back on the topic, right? A good servant, but a bad master. Never let your mind, never let your habits allow you to become a bad master of yourself. And maybe I'm interpreting it a little bit different than you. And if you're interpreting this saying differently than I am, feel free to go ahead and leave it in the comments because quite frankly, obviously this is up for debate. This is up for just conversation. And I do believe that we must have these types of conversations more because it's a lot better than most conversations, I would say, that a lot of people have on a daily basis. There's a lot of the same type of conversations, a lot of fruitless conversations that a lot of people have. And I like this podcast is meant to go ahead and help you out. It's supposed to go ahead and help me out. It's supposed to go ahead and help you out. Anyone watching this, I'm just trying to get out. I'm trying to give out the right message to the right person at the right time. That's all I'm trying to do out here, man. So, give me an example, right? Do you have an example for what is something that can be a good servant, but a terrible master, right? A good servant being something that if you do within a clear structure and don't abuse it, then it won't be a bad master in which is something that completely governs your entire life and allows you to go ahead and become your life is not going to be dictated based off of you taking this action or this certain way. And I keep using parts of the of definitions. I wouldn't say definitions. Parts of, let's just say, one of the ones that I had mentioned, the mind or the money or the thinking, right? Because I do believe at the end of the day, it's really going to come back down to your own personal life, and maybe you can remove it, but I don't like I said, I don't really see it happening. When you give an example of this, let me see if I can give you another one off the top. Good servant and a bad master. Let's just say, that's a good one. Let me give you one that's deep. Let me give you one that's deep, man. Good servant, but a bad master. Hmm. This is gonna be an interesting. This is gonna be an interesting one. Hopefully, let's think. Let's think. Hmm. I can't think of one right now. Hmm. Can't seem to think of one right now that comes to the top of the mind. But the ones that I had mentioned, like I said, just double down on those for sure. Double down on those for sure. Think about them. Like I said, at the very least, ponder the idea that I have discussed today. Maybe, like I said, maybe you watching this, maybe there's one that pops into your mind that you have to tell me. You just you think about it, you're like, man, he really should have thought of that one. Let me know for sure. These things must be discussed. These things must be discussed because, quite frankly, I don't see enough people discussing things of substance, things of importance, things of good conversation, of thought provoking types of conversation. And this is what this podcast is about, man. Good servants, but a bad master. Come on, I gotta think of one, man. I gotta think of one at least. Okay, let me think of one. Let me think of one, man. I think those ones are so broad that they encapsulate a lot of things that can be said as the example, right? Thinking in your mind, that's like those are huge things. Those are huge things right there. Hopefully you believe that as well. Good servant but a bad master. Let's just say I'll give you another example, right? Your ego. Your ego can be a good servant but a bad master. So I'm gonna go ahead and define what I think your ego is. Your ego is essentially your sense of self-importance to an extent. I'll say that, right? Like I said, I don't know the actual dictionary definition of ego, but essentially, if I had to define it, I would say it's something along the lines of that, as understanding, as having a sense of self-importance. I'll say that, right? With that being said, your ego is a good servant, but a bad master, right? So there's a lot of people who may be egotistical, where their ego is just, let's just say, too big, and then an ego can work towards for you, but it also can work against you in the same capacity. So with that being said, it's like this: if your ego is to be a person who's hardworking, and that is your identity that you uphold, that is the ego that you have as a person who works hard. That can be a good servant if used and channeled correctly. But having a big ego can also be a bad master, because let's just say maybe you over criticize people who aren't good workers, or who aren't hardworking. That would be, I would say, that would be an ego flaw that you might have. Or maybe let's just say you work so hard that everybody else you think are absolute losers for not working as hard as you. That would be your ego acting in accordance to being a bad master. The ego one is, there's many different areas you can go with that, but hopefully you understand what I'm trying to say. Yes, your ego can work for you. It can also work against you. It could also, I'm trying to give you another example where it will be a bad master. Let me think. Being a bad master, huh? I feel like that's a lot more harder to come up with an idea for, because your ego can be a good servant in many different aspects. When is the ego? Okay, let's just say your ego drives you to seek validation, or seek vices. We'll say that, right? The ego that you have, you can indulge within these things. You can, and nothing's really stopping you, right? That would be a good representation of understanding that the ego can be a bad master, but if channeled in the correct way. If you have a good understanding of your ego, you can only use it to be a good servant, and you can void yourself from having it be a bad master and not serving you the way that you would want, and it not governing your life and the decisions that you make, right? That is why it would be a bad master. There's people that let their ego completely govern their life, and they let it dictate all of their actions, and any and every impulse that they have is simply what they act on. They don't guess. They don't overthink. I'm not even overthink. They don't properly think about their actions that they're going to go ahead and make. They simply just make a decision, and that is what their ego is telling them is the best decision for them to go ahead and make. They don't take into account their values. They don't take into account other people. They simply let their ego be the deciding factor of their actions, and then it takes over their life, and then it allows them to make decisions that, maybe looking back, that they probably wouldn't be the best, but it was just to satisfy the ego. And the ego, satisfying the ego, is a bottomless pit. And of course, like I said, I'm not saying you need to have no ego. I'm not saying that either. I do believe that it can be a good servant if you channel it in the right ways, but if not, it can completely govern your life. It can take over certain areas of your life, and you might be regretful, right? That was just my example, real quick, but yes, that is pretty much all I have to say for today's episode. If you're rewatching this or watching this live, I want you to go ahead and let me know an example. I simply an example, right? What is your example of something that is a good servant but a bad master? There's plenty of ones that can be used. Let's just say, I'll give you another one, right? A good servant but a bad master. Let's just say your stomach. This is just a goofy one, of course, right? Your stomach is a good servant because whatever you eat it's going to be able to process it fantastically, right? And like I said, if you eat good, your body is going to respond accordingly. right? You might look better, you might feel better, right? You might be able to get stronger off of this, right? But it's a bad master because maybe it's not necessarily giving you the best insight. And like I said, maybe somebody would say this is your mind or whatever, right? Maybe it's not necessarily giving you, you have some cravings, right? Maybe it's not necessarily giving you the best insight of what you need to go ahead and eat. So you might desire a piece of cake, or you might desire a whole tub of ice cream. Let's just say that, right? Your stomach would be a good servant, can be a good servant, but also it could be a terrible master, because if you let your decisions be governed solely by based off of what you want in the moment, instead of knowing what is good and acting on what is good, then the odds of you being a bad master, or your stomach rather being a bad master to you, is a more likely outcome for damn sure, right? Obviously, there was just one little goofy example before I go ahead and go, but I appreciate everyone stopping by. This was Life of a Champ podcast, episode 196, talking about being a good servant or a bad master. A few things I want to say before I go ahead and end it off. Make sure you go ahead and leave a like on my video, as well as make sure you go ahead and tap in with the YouTube Shorts as well as the YouTube clips. I've been posting a lot more frequently, and if you can't catch a full podcast but still want to get some of the game that I be spitting, I need you to go ahead and check those out. They've been doing fantastically. Shout out to Anthony for helping me edit. And make sure you go and follow me on Twitch, TikTok, and on Rumble at Life of a Champ podcast on every single platform. Other than that, I'm going to go ahead and leave you guys off with the podcast motto. Fellas out here, we don't just work around here, man. We outwork. So make sure you outworking these motherfuckers, because you know that we are. You know the ones around me. You know we definitely are, for damn sure. Tap in with the next podcast on Thursday, as well as tap in with the live streams that I'll be doing this upcoming week. I'm striving to go ahead and stream on Mondays. So if there's a certain video or creator that I'm going to go ahead and react to, I need you to go ahead and let me know. I'm trying to get some new people to react to. I've been reacting to Jordan Peterson, Chris Williamson, Hamza. If you know any of those people, they're fantastic. Definitely would recommend go watch some of the old reactions that I have. But other than that, y'all have a good rest of your night. And like I said, tap in with the next podcast on Thursday, man.